And we are back on the build phase. I'm Mr. Ben, and today we are going to talk about a stinker. So the Mortal Kombat box has been generally a major hit. All the MCs have reasonable level up conditions. There's lots of fun things you can do in that box, except for maybe the guy on the box, Scorpion. His main character is, unfortunately, a little bit of a stinker. So today I want to do a deep dive on this character and talk about ways that you can maybe build a deck around him. If you're a big Scorpion fan and you want to be able to play Scorpion and not have to wait until turn 6 and play his quite excellent supporting character version, what are some things you want to think about putting into your deck? Now, spoiler alert here at the top of the show, I don't think this is going to be a competitively viable MC unless we get a lot more cards that do very specific things. At this point, I think you probably can build a functional kitchen table deck for some fun, but if you're taking this into a Shark Tank environment, be prepared to have a very rough day at the tournament table. Before we get to the meat of the episode, I want to take a second to say thank you to all of my patrons and specifically shout out Brad, Jason, Justin, Patrick, Peter, and Roland. These are the people that help keep the lights on around here. Join the coolest clubhouse in Versus, patreon.com/thebuildphase. In the upcoming months, we're going to be redoing our reward tiers, so keep your eyes out for that update. All right, let's move back to Scorpion. So to start, I think we should just get us all on the same page, and let's read this level 1, talk about what he does well, analyze where he struggles, and try to figure out how we're going to build around this character. So the Scorpion stat line at level 1 is 4-3-6. I've said for a while that I don't like seeing the number 5 in the right-hand corner of the cards. This guy has 6, so that is already fine. That's good. 6 health is where I want my characters to be at. Great. 4-3. Now, having a 4 attack on a level 1 is pretty common for the aggressively slanted main characters, and this guy is definitely aggressively slanted. The 3 defense is super sketchy. Now, 4-3 on a level 1 is not an uncommon stat line, but given how much difficulty we might have collecting this guy's experience, that 3 is a very intimidating part of this card. There are 1-drops that are going to be able to stun him with ease. There's a good chance the opposing main character is going to be able to stun him. So you are going to... One of the themes of this breakdown is that you're probably going to have a very low to the ground curve. You're going to have to expect to, on some of these early turns, underdrop so you can get more bodies in play. You want to do this to shore up and protect this weakness on your main character. You want to be able to have bodies in front of that 3 defense or present other targets that are such a threat that your opponent has to prioritize dealing with them instead of stacking wounds on your main character. Otherwise, you're probably going to die. 3 defense is not great. Okay, his main power is get over here. Well, hold on, let me do that again. Get over here! And he has this on both level 1 and 2, and it's pretty good. Pay a red, move an enemy back row character to its front row. This is going to give you access to characters you wouldn't otherwise be able to hit. We've seen this effect on other cards throughout the history of Versus, most recently and perhaps most notably on Spider Carnage. This is an effect that's worth running reds in your deck for. So this is very good. So at this point, we have an aggressively slanted stat line and a power that allows you to disrupt your opponent's ability to prevent or blunt your aggression. So all of this is pretty good. This is all completely reasonable, borderline awesome. And then we get to Am Vengence, which of course makes me think that I'm accidentally reading a Batman main character. Yeah. Where's my Batman animated series fans at? I Am Vengeance, I am that. Anyway. Level up 2, when an exhausted enemy character gets KO'd on your turn, Scorpion gains 1 XP. That is a brutal chunk of words. So let's break down why this is so hard. When you are trying to chase down a level up in a game of Versus, there are always going to be things you have to do. There's going to be ways you have to warp your play to fit what your main character wants you to do. And there are some main characters that do this thing where they hand a lever to your opponent that your opponent can pull to make your level up harder or impossible or disrupt it in some way. This level up hands your opponent 2 levers. there are two things they can do to fully stop you from ever gaining XP. Now, that's an extreme situation, and I fully concede that if the opponent just doesn't recruit any characters, that's probably going to be a game loss for them. But there are ways to navigate this where you can both get value out of your characters and deny experience to Scorpion. So your opponent can choose to not recruit anything. That's one way they can disrupt you. Your opponent can choose to, if you're on Scorpion and I'm sitting across from you and I have two 2-drops in my hand and one of them has 2 health and the other one has 1 health, well, maybe I play the 1 health one, even if it's a little bit suboptimal, but just because I know I can get it KO'd and then it's gone, and then you have no chance of getting experience off of it because it's dead on my turn. I can recruit characters that I don't attack with, so I can put blockers out in front of you that you have to deal with, but they're not exhausted, and then only attack with ranged back row guys that you can't get to. So there are a lot of ways for the opposing player to make life very hard for Scorpion. Now, the one, I was going to say saving grace, but perhaps that's overstating my case. The one silver lining around this dark cloud of a level up condition is that he only needs 2 XP. So you could potentially make this, if your opponent goes first, and I can't think of what they could recruit to get 2 bodies out on turn 1. So maybe this is a bad example already. But you could do this level up as early as like turn 2. If your opponent recruits a dude on 1, recruits a dude on 2, and they don't play around this, as sometimes when we're at the kitchen table, we don't play the most optimal play. We're having fun, we're chilling, and there is to some degree an understanding in casual games where it's like, hey, let's see you do your thing. So maybe I don't choose the play that totally shuts you out necessarily. Now, again, at the tournament table, you don't want to have this bag of dirty tricks to hand to your opponent every time you sit down. And putting Scorpion on the playmat as your MC in a tournament setting is absolutely handing your opponent a bag of tools to make your day harder. So again, this is probably a whole show about casual building of this character. So let's say you do it. Let's say you get those 2 experience points. Well, that gets us up to a level 2 version. He becomes a 7/6/6. Those are totally respectable level 2 stats. It's fine. Just totally fine. I don't feel like it's a blowout in any particular direction. I do like that, again, it's still a little bit aggressively slanted, but that they bumped his defense up to where he could maybe withstand a shot from like a 3-drop, some 4-drops. He's still, even if you level him up fast, he's still going to be vulnerable defensively pretty quickly, but at least he can take somebody down with him with that 7 attack. Okay, the get over here gets modified, as a lot of these Mortal Kombat characters level 2 powers do, to add an amplify condition, and this lets you, if you, again, for anybody not familiar with amplify, since it hasn't been a keyword in 100 years, you discard the red from your hand rather than flip it face down from your row. You still drag a dude from the back to the front, but now they're immobile. They can't move for a turn. So essentially, if you amplify with this, it's like Pain for the power twice. You're getting 2 uses of this power for Pain once. Totally reasonable. He has a fatality trigger, which allows him to add an extra wound to an enemy supporting character when using the finish him plot twist. I'm going to come back to talking about the finish him plot twist in a little bit. So I think the biggest problem, the biggest oversight, the one thing that would have fixed this guy, and maybe they tried this in testing and it was too strong, but if Get Over Here exhausted the character that it drugged to the front, then he could have like level up condition 4 and it would probably be okay. I know that might be an exaggeration, but that's not the version of Get Over Here that we got. We got the one that I just read. So I break this down into 2 main buckets of things that we have to do. Because your opponent has so many ways to disrupt and stop you from doing what you want to do, we really, or at least let me rephrase that. The way I approach building this is I got to put my challenges in front of me and I got to address them first. So that's exactly what I did. And I broke those challenges down into 2 things. First, we can't rely on our opponent to do any of this for us, obviously. So we want to have ways to create exhausted characters on our turn. If our opponent does so much as recruit a character, as long as there's a supporting, if they're recruiting no characters or they're getting them KO'd every single time, the low to the ground flood approach is going to give us enough attacks and hopefully team attacks that we'll be able to start stacking wounds on their main character. If They are recruiting characters, but not exhausting them. We need to have a way to solve that problem. And we need to have a way to solve for the problem of them using a strategy of only exhausting guys in the back row and shooting at us from range. Now, Scorpion has one answer for how to get to that character. And I'm going to use this term a bunch throughout this, getting to the character. Now, let me break down what I mean by that. We need to be able to have stealth or flight or what? Let me look at Sonya here real quick, or sniper to get into the back row. The Scorpion get over here power is a way to get to the character, but then that alone isn't enough, because if I can stealth you for 5 attack but you have 6 defense, that's not good enough. That doesn't get the stun. So we also have to have characters that are low to the ground, cheaply costed, that have big attack values. So we're going to want to pack, and this is photographic universe, so we're going to want to put things like, I think Falcon is like such a good example of the kind of character I'm talking about. He's cheap, he has 6 attack for a 3 cost, which is really, really good. That's the kind of rate that I like to see. And he has a built-in, with flight, he has a built-in way to get to that back row. I also think looking within the box, things like Sonya Blade kind of fall into this. The problem is she's a 5 cost, and if you're waiting until turn 5, or another, well, I'll get to that in a second. If you're waiting until turn 5, you're probably in trouble. So you're going to want to rely on dragging guys to the front with Scorpions get over here, as well as being able to play characters that have these bigger attack values so you can ensure you get that stun. Like Maria Hill is another great example. She, again, comes, much like Falcon, comes built in with a way to get to the back row, and she has 6 attack for only 2 cost. So that's exactly the kind of cards that we want to look for. Similarly, if your opponent plays a guy that has 2 health and we're attacking into that, well, all of this was for nothing. Sure, we established the stealth to get to the character, and we established the attack to get to the character, but we didn't establish the fatality to get to the character. And of course, this is where Finish Him comes into play. Now, the issue with Finish Him, and maybe it's not an issue, maybe it actually is kind of a blessing with how this character is designed. You don't want to be camping on Finish Hims, waiting for your level 2 so you can get the extra value on Scorpion's fatality. I think you want to be proactively using these to try to get that experience as quickly as possible. So having that, if you put all 4 Finish Hims into your deck, having like an extra value outlet towards the end of the game is pretty cool. But you don't feel bad. You're not saving them for that because you have this other really important thing to do with them in the front half of the game. So it makes the plot twist a lot more viable throughout the whole game. Now, along those same lines, looking at characters that have words like lethal probably makes a lot of sense to try to catch this experience. Now, there is a special location in the world that gives us both lethal and stealth, but you're jumping through a lot of hoops if you're going to try to make Madripoor work in this deck. For one, it's not even going to be online until turn 4, and that's assuming you've top deck all 4 Madripoors, and then you need some villain-affiliated characters to get those benefits. But that is something you could potentially be looking at. As long as we're kind of on the topic of like weird combos, I think Edith, Tony Stark is maybe something worth looking at in here because it gives you the ability to throw 6 attack into something without having to rely on stealth or sniper or flight. So that could potentially be helpful. The Vampiric Hypnosis plot twist lets you drag an enemy character up to its front row. Man, I wish this exhausted it too, but sadly it does not. And I think the time stick is another thing that's worth mentioning here, where you can, if you strike an enemy character and there's a version of it in the KO pile already, you can KO it. So these are all ways that you can force the KO. You can get to the character. Alter Ego is another thing I had on my list here to mention. DPO. Some of these are more reasonable than others. But getting to the character isn't enough. When we started talking about this, I mentioned that I think there's 2 major challenges that Scorpion has. The other challenge is creating an exhausted character. And this one is a little bit tougher. So I went to versus.tcgbrowser.com. Buy that guy a drink next time you're there. And I punched in exhaust into the search bar for photographic universe cards. And let me tell you, the pickings are slim. So there's something like Mantis. Yeah, okay. But she only works if your main character is Ego. So that doesn't work for this deck. You've got something like Aisha. the yellow lady from Guardians Volume 2, she dazes exhausted characters. That's no good. We don't want to daze them. We have to KO them. Really, the only thing that popped out as being a useful supporting character is Shocker, who has the ability to pay a blue, and when he strikes a dude in the front row, he pushes him to the back row, exhausts him, and importantly, makes it so they can't ready next turn. So that character actually feels like he would be quite useful in getting somebody exhausted. And maybe you don't have the lethal. Maybe you don't have the Hela is another way you could potentially, like Hela's turn 5. Like, and turn 5 is probably too slow for our Scorpion. So if you don't have those lethals, if you don't have the finish him, Shocker could potentially set it up so that you could exhaust the guy, he's exhausted next turn, and that's where you hit him with the KO. So I think Shocker fits in this deck pretty well. I think the 6-cost Sub-Zero fits in the deck pretty well. But again, turn 6 is, if you're waiting until turn 6 to freeze a guy, even if you level up on 6, that's starting to feel really dangerous with 3 defense and only 6 hit points. It feels like you're probably in risky business territory. But at the same time, if you're playing an aggressive character who wants to flood a bunch of dudes out, the chances that you're going to be able to have 3 bodies in the way and your opponent only has 2 attackers so they can't get to your main character, that does seem a little more likely. So I don't think these 5 and 6 cost cards are totally outside the realm of playability or possibility, but it's both using your entire turn to recruit one thing, which I don't really think you want to do with Scorpion that often. I think you want to be underdropping. To that end, another 6-cost card that I think really could make an appearance here is the Bucky Barnes that came out in the Falcon Winter Soldier box. His team attack power, being able to refill your hand, that's just the kind of thing the top end of an aggro deck wants, as well as when he team attacks, he gets lethal. So this is another way to get to guys. I think maybe the most important card, though, that the photographic universe is going to offer us to really try to help Scorpion do the harder of the two things, the exhausting of the character, is Frost. Not only does she have the ability to come out on 4, which is pretty good, it's still on the expensive side, but it's early enough in the game that you're not going to be dead yet. She pays the blue, she freezes the guy, but also all frozen enemy characters can't strike that turn. So that could potentially allow Scorpion to attack into something and not get hit back while collecting that experience. So overall, I mean, I know I said this is the top of the show, but the place where this guy is going to land is squarely at the kitchen table. And I used to have more hope for main characters like this. When Thing from the Fantastic Four was previewed, I looked at him and I was like, yeah, that's awkward, but it's not impossible. No, it's impossible. Thing has never leveled, ever, at any point in any game that anyone has ever played. But he got a great 6-drop, so we still got to play with that iconic character, so it wasn't a loss. Scorpion, he's going to struggle to level. There's just so many ways for your opponent to play around it, and it forces you to build your deck in these like very specific directions where you're going to have to rely on blues for cards like Shocker and Frost. You're going to have to rely on these characters that have ways to get to the back row, but maybe aren't going to be great team attackers like Maria Hill, Falcon. And it just puts you in kind of an awkward place where so much of your deck is going to have to be front-loaded to chase down those 2 experience points. And it's such a tantalizingly low number, too. Like, it doesn't feel like I could do that in 1 turn. But your opponent is going to say, no, you can't. And that's just kind of the cold, hard reality of Scorpion. Now, I can't be disappointed about Scorpion as a character because, again, his 6-drop is just an absolute banger. It's great. The 2 6-drops on the Earthrealm team, Scorpion and Sub-Zero, I love that they're both at the same drop. I love that they're both so well represented. Those are like perfect supporting character cards. This main character, though, oh man. Even if they made it 1 experience, getting the 1 could be a bridge too far. I don't like these level up conditions that put so many restrictions on you that it prevents you from being able to just build a versus deck and play and have some fun. And that's really kind of, I think the saddest people in the world with regard to this card are going to be people for whom Scorpion is Mortal Kombat. The kind of guy who I always play when I get a new Mortal Kombat game, I play Scorpion. I learn all the Scorpion stuff. You're probably not going to be having the best time playing with Scorpion as a main character anywhere other than casual play. And you know what? That's probably fine. This guy is not completely unplayable in the same way that a card like Thing or a card like Kid Kaiju is. Those cards are almost jokes. Scorpion is just the slightest hit. Like if there's a dumpster, he's standing on the lid of the dumpster rather than being in it. Like maybe some of the dumpster juice has splattered upon his boots, so he's like a little dumpstery, but he's just enough. Maybe I'm being too optimistic because I actually do really like Scorpion, so I really wanted this main character to work. And I think within, as long as you set your expectations in a certain place and you understand what you're trying to do is work extremely hard for not the best payoff, then he's fine. If what you're trying to do is build a deck that's going to crack skulls at a tournament, probably you want to look at Liu Kang instead of Scorpion. Or like many other main characters. I'm only saying Liu Kang because I like Liu Kang so much out of this box. So that is my attempt to come in with the defibrillators clear. I should start doing a fiction show where I do all the sound effects myself. That is my attempt to come in and do a little bit of triage on Scorpion and give my best faith effort at thinking about the cards that you would need to put together to make this guy functional. Did we succeed? I don't know. You guys can let me know on Discord or on Facebook if you think this was even worth the effort or if this guy is too far gone for saving. This has been the Build Phase. I'm Mr. Ben. Go win some games.